So I do not mess with angels or with demons. I know from Rilke that ein jeder Engel ist schrecklich. Every angel is terrifying. But I cannot stay away either. I find this fascinating. My first magic ring, here you can see one on the hand of the performance artist Rosa. My first magic square ring I saw in a small museum in Tangier, Morocco. And then a few days later, in the shop of Mr. Kafka in Essaouira, I was actually able to buy one. And I found a second one on Portobello Market in London. Where else? I hope I will find more. So Islamic mathematicians in the Arab world knew magic squares since the early 7th century. Here is quite a simple one. And if you refer to the one that Ron is wearing, you can see some of the similarities. It's based on early styles of Arab writing. And then there's this. It's an undergarment I photographed in the museum of the Topkapı Palace in Istanbul. It took a very large number of magic squares to protect this precious child. It is believed that magic squares originated in India and that Arabs learned about them and other combinational mathematics and astronomy when they came in contact with Indian culture. You can find this in a variety of cultures, not just Islamic cultures, where the magic squares or magic configurations are placed on undergarments and are then worn for protection under the normal day clothes. And so I move to part 3. Because I will not go on talking about Sudoku, even though when I prepared for this paper, I spoke with members of my family and friends who are confessed Sudoku addicts. The aspect of obsession and or addiction is very interesting in the context that somebody is magicked into the circle, the binding circle of a Sudoku, of a magic square. I would like to follow this trail in a different way. I would like to go to sometimes a great notion in the 13th episode in the 4th season of Battlestar Galactica. The fleet and its silent allies have united in a joint search for Earth. They encountered a devastated world where their expectations are crudely shattered by events that echo down the millennia from the original destruction of their home of humanity. I believe Battlestar Galactica is still showing on Netflix, so if you're interested, I can only recommend it as one of my most favorite series ever. So here, fighter pilot and warrior car chase, call name Starbuck, accompanied by the Cylon Leoben, is looking for the beacon which had led them to Earth. They find a wreckage of a fighter plane with a charred corpse. Starbuck rips the dog tag necklace from the corpse to discover her own name and the sigil of an angel on the necklace, on the dog tag. And I put here also, I put the YouTube link. So if you want to kind of watch the scene, I was not able to embed this video into this PowerPoint, but you can go to YouTube and see it for yourself. So that's what she found, a dog tag necklace with her name and the sigil of an angel. And Kara asks, if that's me lying there, then what am I? She does not say, who am I, but what am I? Why, in a moment of great distress and trauma, does she refer to herself not as a subject, but an object? And it seems to me that the switch has been magicked by the necklace. In Daybreak, the last 74th and 75th episode, a world to settle on has finally been found for humanity. After having said her final goodbyes and having indeed led humanity to safety, Kara disappears into thin air. What happened to Kara is left ambiguous in the film, but every fan who followed the carefully laid out signs along the path of the story knows that Kara is indeed an angel. In the Lacanian perspective, we are who we are only in relation to other people. Our aims and desires are shaped by the desires of others, by interpersonal dynamics, social expectations, and prohibitions. Our knowledge of the world we learn from other people, the language we speak, pre-exists us. Maybe that's why living in a second language can be experienced as a liberation after it has been experienced as profound restriction. And so our thoughts follow pre-established concepts and linguistic structures. A transcendental soul is denied, and the existence of a self is questioned. The effect is that when we assimilate these social conventions, the pressure of instinctual drives appears to us as threat, danger, demonic, including the ultimate impossibility to imagine ourselves dead and our flesh decomposing. Most, if not all, alchemical, transformative, magical, and spiritual tropes include a period where matter is separated from essence. As something is extracted, the ruby bowl, the rose essence, and now Kara's necklace taken from the corpse. These things seem to me placeholders of an important and much deeper existential shift. The otherness of the image, the subject perceived when mirrored, creates a negative dimension in the subject's existence. I am never, in Lacan's thinking, fully myself. The relationship within which my ego, my I, comes into being is a relationship with an image that is not me, that is an unattainable ideal. Part 5. Foucault asserts that Lacan has, in his reflection on subjectivity and the mirror stage, reintroduced into psychoanalysis the oldest interrogation and the oldest disquiet of the epimeleia heatu, the care of the self, a most general form of spirituality and specifically concerned with the question of the price the subject must pay for being able to speak truth. Foucault defines spirituality as the method the subject uses to transform him or herself in order to gain access to truth. He describes the conflict between spirituality and theology as being the important historical issue rather than a conflict between spirituality and science. Foucault notes that a number of differences in the ways pre-Cartesian and post-Cartesian systems approach the problem of acquiring knowledge and the notion of self-transformation. He describes this as the difference between the spiritual exercises and the intellectual method. In the hermeneutics of the subject, Foucault talks in 6 January 1982, first hour, about the care of the self. and its modern replacement, self-knowledge. At the end of his lesson, he goes on to say that for the subject to have right of access to the truth, it must be changed, transformed, shifted, and become to some extent and up to a point other than himself. And later he says eros and ascesis are, he thinks, the two major forms of Western spirituality for conceptualizing the modalities in which the subject must be transformed in order finally to become capable of truth. He also asserts that a reactivation of spirituality foretells a return to ethics. Lacan's approach is for Foucault problematic insofar transformation is thought of in terms of self-knowledge and therefore the acquisition of knowledge, which relates to science or at least to scientific methodologies to fulfill the function of spiritual transformation. We do not know how a psychoanalysis could produce spirituality, though it must be other than purely through knowledge. For Foucault, we cannot have spirituality unless we acknowledge the sphere of subjective practice. For him, the subject is not a substance, it is form, and this form is not primarily or always identical to itself. Foucault claims that the subject is a reality distinct from the body. Thus, self-constitution of the subject is not the subject producing itself, but shaping what is already there. And so finally, I quote from Mark Kelly from his book Foucault, Subjectivity and Technologies of the Self. He writes, the subject then is something that is founded on a kind of ontological split between itself and the body, but a split that is only relative rather than substantial or absolute. Moreover, the subject can be said to lack self-identity inasmuch that it has, because of the split, the capacity and tendency to change continuously. Indeed, to take on different forms even at the same time. It is always changing and always plural, given it a distance from itself that allows it to work on itself. So here are my bibliography, the literature that I used for creating this lecture. Thank you very much. Let me come back to myself. And I hope that you enjoyed the lecture. I will put it up in all the points that we have been activating for this weekend. And I see you again tomorrow on Sunday. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.